last month voted overwhelmingly to repeal a law banning abortion. It reignited the debate north of the Irish border, where having a termination remains illegal.
And today, the Supreme Court will rule if Northern Ireland's abortion ban is a breach of human rights. It follows an emotional debate in the House of Commons this week on whether the law should change.
We have people today in Northern Ireland who are rearing families, who are contributing to society, who are building their businesses, who are working in our factories, who are sitting in our schools, who otherwise, if we had had the legislation which exists here in the rest of the United Kingdom, would have been discarded and put in a bin before they were ever born.
I was ill when I made the incredibly hard decision to have a termination. I was having seizures every day. I wasn't even able to control my own body, let alone care for a new life. So, Mr. Speaker, are you seriously telling me that in a civilised world, rape, incest, or a fetus that is so sadly deformed that it could never live are not sufficient grounds for a woman to have the power to decide for herself? That she shouldn't make that decision? No, enough.
Some emotional testimony on both sides of the debate there. Well, joining us now from outside the Supreme Court is Katherine O'Brien from the British Pregnancy Advisory Service, which is a pro-choice charity, and Alithea Williams, who represents a pro-life group, the Society for the Protection of Unborn Children. Thank you both for joining us this morning. Such a significant day. Katherine, let me start with you. Your organisation is part of the coalition which brought this case to court. What are you expecting to hear today?
Well, we heard some incredibly moving testimony from women who've been deeply affected by the abortion ban in Northern Ireland. Women forced to continue a pregnancy to term that had no chance of survival. We heard of a 13-year-old girl forced to travel for a termination in England after she was raped by a family member. So I really think that whatever the outcome of the case today, that politicians in Westminster have heard enough now, and they've decided that action needs to be taken in Westminster if Northern Ireland will do nothing to end this injustice.
Yeah, and Alithea, on that note, this is the highest court in the land deciding this. Will you accept the judgment, whichever way it goes?
Well, what we're seeing here is the courts trying to force the Northern Ireland legislature to legislate abortion in Northern Ireland, and this is a decision which is properly the mandate of the Northern Ireland Executive. And it's particularly worrying that what is happening here is the court is trying to make out that there is some international right to abortion. This right does not exist. There is no right anywhere in international treaties. There is a right to life, and the people of Northern Ireland uphold that right to life.
Do you think it is something that is fair to be decided in the Supreme Court?
Well, I don't, because it is the proper place of the Northern Ireland Assembly to decide on its laws.
The government, though, in Northern Ireland hasn't actually sat since 2017, so there's no forum there for it to be debated. So doesn't it have to be in a court or Westminster in order for this to move forward?
Well, it's true that the Assembly has not sat since 2017, but it's important to remember that in 2016 the Assembly actually debated these very issues. Abortion in the cases of so-called fatal fetal abnormality and abortion in the case of sexual crime. And both of these were overwhelmingly rejected by the elected, locally accountable politicians of Northern Ireland. And I think there is a cross-party, cross-community consensus that the will of Westminster, or indeed the courts, should not be imposed on the people of Northern Ireland in this very sensitive and devolved issue.
Katherine, it's clearly politically sensitive, this. You think, though, that Theresa May should intervene, don't you? How do you want her to do that?
Well, the law that in effect governs abortion in Northern Ireland is the 1861 Offences Against the Person Act. That was passed here in Westminster, and I believe that it is right and proper that Westminster should look to repeal the sections that criminalise women in Northern Ireland for accessing an abortion. She should listen to, those incredibly moving speeches that we heard in Parliament earlier this week, indeed from her own MPs, and she should listen to the voices of people in Northern Ireland. Polling repeatedly shows that people in Northern Ireland support abortion in many of these cases. So she should listen to those voices and take action.
But would you agree, though, that this is very, very politically sensitive because of the history of Northern Ireland and the way it's governed?
Absolutely, absolutely. But last year we saw the Conservative government take very decisive action in allowing women from Northern Ireland to access funded abortion care here in England and Wales. So there has been a precedent set for that. And as you raised, there is no assembly in Northern Ireland to make these decisions. So it is right and proper. These are UK citizens. Our UK government should take action.
Yeah. One of the things that obviously struck you both when we were listening there to the testimony in Parliament yesterday, Alithea, can I just ask you, hearing the testimony there given by Heidi Allen, the MP, how does that make you feel? It was very, very raw emotion there.
Yeah, it definitely was very moving to hear that. And, you know, the pro-life movement is very aware of how difficult abortion is and what an effect it has on women. You know, we actually run a crisis a counselling service for women who have experienced abortion and who deeply, deeply regret it. And I think we need to be hearing those voices as well. And but what we need to remember in this is that the courts are trying to impose a form of lethal discrimination against disabled people, and it's not something that the Westminster has the right to impose on the people of Northern Ireland.
And again, Katherine, just another thought with you on we obviously heard the other side in testimony. Again, another very powerful thought given there. How does that make you feel hearing about the people who wouldn't be here if they'd been aborted?
Well, I mean, I find that argument slightly spurious. I mean, I found it quite shocking, actually, the way that some MPs were discussing this yesterday, and the complete insensitivity that they showed to their fellow MPs who talked about not their emotional experience of having an abortion, but their incredibly emotional and difficult experience of being faced with an unplanned, unwanted pregnancy that was deeply affecting their health and well-being. And those are the voices that I listen to. I listen to the voices of the women we see every day in our clinics, and it is heartbreaking to hear women forced to travel overseas to access healthcare in deeply tragic situations.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time this morning. Katherine O'Brien there from the British Pregnancy Advisory Service, and Alithea Williams from the Society for the Protection of Unborn Children.